Hello and welcome to my first podcast episode. Yay! For those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is Jenny. I am Fantasma Witch online. Some of you may know me from Instagram or TikTok or possibly even YouTube, which is a bit newer for me. So this podcast has no name yet as of this recording. Maybe I'll have a name by the time it comes out. But I just wanted to create a podcast because I needed a way to distract myself from a lot of the things that are happening in the world. And I really am an advocate of sharing information, sharing, my experiences with other people, whether that's my spooky stories, paranormal experiences, or witchy tips, psychic tips. So if you've seen my TikTok videos, it's pretty much going to be like that, but a bit longer, a little bit more wordy. I can actually breathe. I don't have to worry about editing so much. So thank you for joining me here on this new adventure. So like I said, if you don't know me, I go by Phantasma Witch online. Overall, I am a psychic witch, but mostly I offer tarot reading, palm reading, pet communication, which is my favorite. But I offer a lot of different types of divination, and this consists of everything from doing dream work to intuitive consultations, mediumship, things of that nature. So, in this first episode, I'm just going to do an introduction, and that way you can get to know me. And that way you can kind of have a better understanding of where I am coming from, the context of my life, my experiences, and my practice. And hopefully that can give you a little bit more understanding of, what I'm talking about in future episodes. Future episodes, I would like to be able to talk about different witch tips, different things I have learned and experienced. So hopefully it'll help you on your journey, give you some insights, or even just give you something to think about, even if you don't agree. It gives you a new perspective, right? So, I have been working professionally as a psychic witch for just about 9 years now. And despite working professionally for 9 years, I've been practicing intuitively since I was a child. So I had a lot of experiences growing up as a kid. And when I say experiences, I am talking about paranormal experiences specifically with ghosts, spirits, and different kinds of entities. Um, the first time I ever realized that I had seen a ghost was one time I was in the car with my uncle, and we were driving home late at night from an event. And we were just chit-chatting, and I was looking at him. And when I looked back out front of the car, on the road was a old man, and I remember him so distinctly to this day. He had khaki pants on that were like kind of high waisted, with a belt, and a sort of like polo shirt with like stripes on it, like a big stripe, like kind of like a blue-green color, and he was balding. And he had just walked in front of the car, and as quickly as I saw him, he disappeared, completely gone, vanished into thin air. I thought we had hit somebody. As a kid, this was really terrifying because I literally thought suddenly there was a man, suddenly there was not a man. And I was looking behind us. I thought maybe but we didn't hit anything. There was no bump, there was nothing. And my uncle was very confused at my reaction. And that's when I realized I had seen something that he did not see, that no one else had experienced. And that was like my first real indicator. Um, I would say I was probably about like 8 years old, maybe at the time. I'm not exactly sure. I may have been a little younger, but it's funny because despite having that experience and despite having a lot of other experiences, which I'll share in a second, I never really thought of myself as someone who really saw ghosts or spirits until much later in life. And it's just because I was in denial. Even though I had no explanation, even though I had other people to back up my experiences, I was in denial for a very, very long time. And this is a common thing that I realized that some other people who have encounters with spirits and entities also tend to realize much later in life that they were actually having some sort of paranormal phenomenon, but because they couldn't quite process it or accept it at the time, they just kind of pushed it away. And one of the most interesting things that happened recently was my father had passed away a couple years ago. My mom was going through a bunch of old boxes with childhood memorabilia, and there was a homework assignment from like preschool, kindergarten, something like that, where the assignment was to draw and write out in words because it was to kids to learn how to write, learn how to spell and draw. But the question was to essentially draw and write out your favorite thing to see. And mine was ghosts. So I drew a very creepy looking ghost and I wrote ghosts. I will post this picture on my Patreon. I will post this on my Blue Sky. I'll drop all the information of where you can find me at the end of this episode. But if you'd like to see that image, I will post it for you all. So it was really mind-boggling for me much later, many years later, to be like, wow, okay, so apparently I was experiencing things even as a little kid, but I was just so in denial of having those experiences that it wasn't until I was practically an adult that I realized, wow, I actually saw a lot of ghosts and a lot of spirits when I was a kid. One of the most vivid memories that I have of being validated, but still not quite believing it, was I grew up in a haunted house. And I now know that this was not your typical haunting. When I say your typical haunting, what I'm talking about is someone who has passed, whose spirit, a fragment of it, is left behind. That is not what my haunted house was. I call it a haunted house because people understand that really quickly. But in reality, I found out much, much later that my house had a PK manifestation, psychokinetic manifestation, if I'm remembering this correctly. And essentially, it was a projection of energy from underdeveloped empaths, sensitives within the house that when they projected this energy, you can think of it like dirty clothes, like laundry, piling and piling and piling up in the corner. Now, imagine this laundry piles up so high that it becomes sentient and starts knocking stuff off the counters and stuff. Okay, so that's that is the general quick bullet point of what was happening in my house. It was an egregore. It was a psychic, a PK manifestation. So this PK manifestation kind of turned into an egregore. Um, an egregore is essentially a projection of onto either an item or into a space, and this entity takes on its own set of rules, or it can be given rules. It's a whole thing we can get into in another episode. Honestly, I could go on and on about it, but essentially, it became sentient and it was wanting to feed off of fear. And so that's exactly what this egregore, this PK manifestation that became an egregore, this is exactly what it was doing in my home as a kid. It was creating circumstances that were terrifying, that were scary, that were unexplainable, and causing people to have reactions of fear. And it was feeding off of that. So when I was a kid, I had a lot of these experiences. And like I was saying, the most vivid one where I felt so valid was one time late at night, everyone in the house. So there was me, my older sister, my mom, and my dad. We were all woken up to the sound of what it seemed like somebody was like rummaging through the drawers downstairs and going through things. And so my dad, of course, he went downstairs to go see, thinking maybe there was an intruder in the house, which didn't make sense because we had an alarm system And the alarm system also would have been triggered by any kind of motion because it had a motion detector. Nothing went off, but we could hear this happening. My dad went downstairs, and when he came upstairs, he told all of us it was nothing. Don't worry about it. Go back to bed. Didn't think anything of it until a few weeks later, after some time had passed. I remember distinctly sitting at the kitchen table with my sister. My dad was out at work, and my mom said, "Hey girls, so you remember how a couple weeks ago we all were woken up by the weird sound downstairs and your dad said it was nothing?" And we were like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Okay, well, I need to tell you what really happened." Uh, so she proceeded to tell us that our dad went downstairs and the noises stopped. And when he entered the kitchen, all of the drawers, all of the cabinets were all completely open. And he told my mom this and said it must have been rats, which is wild because that that's not actually a very valid explanation whatsoever. There's no way that rats could have opened drawers. There's no way rats could have opened these cabinets. These were like really old school, like heavy duty, like wood. It would have taken a lot of effort. And the sound that it made, and that every single one was open, there was just no way. But my dad was adamant that our house was not haunted. Meanwhile, I was seeing out of the corner of my eye like a blur of a person that would walk by doorways. I would think that this blur of this person walking by would be my mom or my sister, and I would go to talk to them and then realize that they're outside or they're upstairs, or I forgot that they weren't even home. And I was not the only one experiencing this. My sister also experienced this, except for she was seeing it as a mist, like a white mist. And my mom was having similar experiences too. So again, this is a great example of, here I was having all of these experiences as a kid in this house. And despite that, I still could not bring myself to believe that what I was experiencing was something paranormal, was something haunting, right? So that is my experience with spirits when I was a kid. And I have a lot of other stories as well, but we'll save those for other episodes, my friend. And if you've seen my TikToks, surely you have definitely heard quite a few of those already, but I will get more in depth later. Besides that, as far as being a witch goes, as a kid, always wanted to be a witch. Ever since I can remember, that is all I ever wanted, is to be psychic and to be a witch. It was the dream for me. And so I used to play pretend quite a lot. Like most of us, I feel like we would make potions, we would cast spells and things of that nature. And this was like a very common thing for me. And I actually had friends when I was in elementary school where we would pretend that the three of us together were like a coven. And we actually did do a lot of witchy things. And my first experience with witchcraft was when I was probably in fourth grade. And I did what is known as sympathetic magic for anyone who doesn't know what sympathetic magic is. Sympathetic magic is to take something that represents a person or an outcome or a desire and use that as part of the spell. Like attracts like. I'm not explaining this very well, I feel like. Sympathetic magic can be like if you want something cleansed, you can use a lemon because a lemon is used to clean. It's got antibacterial properties. It kills bacteria, right? Okay. So that's the idea behind sympathetic magic. You use something that is symbolic and representative of the thing, the outcome, the person, whatever that may be. And so as a kid, I didn't know any of this. I didn't understand any of this. However, I instinctively, like many of us do, had this feeling, had this knowing. And so me and my friend had decided to do some sympathetic magic, and it did have an outcome, and it scared me. Not that the outcome was horrific, not that the outcome was super bad, and I'm not going to get into the details, but we had done this kind of like half-heartedly. We had done this sympathetic magic thinking, we're going to be witches, we're going to make this thing happen, and we're going to be like the girls in the craft. We were far too young to know what the craft was, but yeah, kids in the 90s, we watch things that maybe are a little too adult for us, but that's okay. And so we thought we were going to be these cool witches casting this spell. And when it actually happened and it actually manifested, and I saw it manifest, it kind of scared me. And I was like, this is too powerful. This is too much. I can't. And being someone who was raised Catholic, who has a bit of religious trauma from that, and at the time, that was very, very scary because all I ever knew about witches was what they teach you in my after school Catholic school, which is not loving, not super positive, very evil, and based in that religion and their beliefs around that. And so it really scared me. And so for a long time, I pulled away from anything that was witch or witchcraft related. And I started diving more into psychic because in my mind they were two completely separate things. And they are. You do not have to be a psychic to be a witch. You don't have to be a witch to be a psychic, vice versa. And that's another topic that we can go on and on about in a future episode. But I started getting into divination because of that. I started buying books at the thrift store that I would often go to with my mom whenever I found books on palm reading or psychic abilities, ESP, anything like that. I even still bought books on ghosts and haunted locations. That was my jam when I was a kid because I so badly wanted to learn how to be psychic. And my first experience with practicing different forms of divination, I didn't even know what I was doing when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And so I would say the experience of this manifestation gone a little wrong when I was a kid was, probably 6 years prior. I was probably about six when that happened, maybe nine. Um, but when I was in just about at the start of junior high, I had a basic deck of playing cards that I used to carry around with me in my bag. And I used to shuffle them for myself and then pull random cards, lay them out, and then just say whatever came to me as a prediction, as a this is what I'm feeling this is saying. This is what I feel like the cards are trying to tell me after asking the cards a question. And I used to do this for myself just to be like, oh, how's the day going to be? What am I going to do today? What's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. Just like having fun. And some of my friends and some other kids at school found out that I was doing this. And so they wanted me to pull cards for them. And I started telling kids, yeah, sure, ask me a question. I'll pull some cards. And the first couple days, it was really fun. People really enjoyed it. And then the predictions started to come true, and it really scared a lot of kids. It really scared them, and it kind of honestly scared me a little bit too, but not enough to stop doing it because what stopped me really was these kids turned around and they were so scared and they were so frightened that they started calling me a Satan worshiper. And like I said, I had a lot of trauma around spirituality, really, and religion. And so it really scared me from openly talking about this and sharing this with other kids at the school. And I learned not that what I was doing was bad, but what I was doing was not okay for the public, for everybody else. I enjoyed it, but it scared others. And if you want an example of one of the predictions that I gave, nothing serious, because we're kids. We're like 12, 13 years old. So what's important to us? School dances. The one that I remember the most, the clearest that I gave that actually ended up happening was one of my friends really wanted to go to the upcoming school dance with a very specific boy. And this is a boy that my friend had a crush on for a very long time. And they wanted to know, one, were they going to go to the dance with this boy? And two, would they end up dating that boy after the dance? So I pulled cards. And what I told them was, you will go to the dance with them and you will start dating. However, he's gonna stop feeling these feelings towards you and he's gonna start like dating another girl pretty soon after. And we laughed about it and again, it was all done in fun. It was all done not super seriously. Like, it was almost like a joke. And that's exactly what happened. And it freaked out everybody who had seen me say this to my friend. And that's when a lot of stuff happened afterwards of me just saying, okay, I can't talk about this anymore. However, my mom had seen me not too long after this. My mom had seen me doing these cards for myself at home. And when she asked me what I was doing, I told her, oh, what I do is I shuffle the cards after I ask a question and then I pull cards and then the cards will tell me what is what's the answer? What's the message? And my mom said, "Oh, like tarot?" And I said, "What's tarot?" Because I had no idea. And she was like, "Here, I'll show you." And she takes me to the pantry and she pulls out a tarot deck. And she tells me that when she was like 20 something years old, she had gone to Salem on a trip with my father and she bought herself a tarot deck. She never used it, but she had always had it. And so she said, why don't you try using these? And that was my first ever tarot deck. I want to interject here real quick. I know that there is a belief that you cannot buy your first deck of cards. You cannot get your own deck. This is not true. You absolutely can. You can gift it to yourself. You do not have to wait for someone else to gift you a deck in order to start. Because if you're gonna wait for someone else to get you the deck, you may be waiting a long time. So I just wanted to add that here. And again, this is something we can talk about in future episodes. So not only was I doing this with tarot, with cartomancy is what I was doing, and then it turned into tarot, but I found out much later, like I would say probably about 5 years later, that I was doing the same thing with pendulum readings. In junior high, I had a necklace that was a crescent moon. And I used to ask this necklace questions, and then depending on how it would swing, would be either yes, no, or maybe. And again, I never heard about pendulum divination. I never heard about dowsing. I was just doing this just like I was doing cartomancy, just because. Just as a kid, I was like, I don't know, I'm making this up. And I did the same thing when it came to, oh gosh, I'm gonna blank on what it's called, but it's divination through random objects and items. And I know there's an official name for it, but I just can't remember it at this moment. So when I was a kid, I used to have a bunch of little knickknacks that I used to collect, a bunch of little toys and random bits and pieces and bobs, like a marble, a small griffin toy, dice, like just random things. And I used to, oh, and a domino with a dragon on it. I remember that one very clearly. And I used to kind of shake them up in my hands and then throw them. And then based on where they would land, how close or far they were from me or each other, I would read them to see what the answer was to my question. Again, I had never heard of this before. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just, in my mind, playing games and having fun. So that's kind of my background with how I started with experiencing spirits and how I started with just in general kind of becoming a witch. I'm gonna take a sip of water. So it had always kind of been in the background of my life, and it remained in the background of my life since I was a kid, through junior high, through high school, through community college, and all the way to college. Eventually, I moved to LA to go to college, and I got my degree and I started working in my career field. For those of you who don't know, I used to be a full-time professional artist in the animation industry. I went to school for it. I got an internship. And as soon as I graduated, a couple months later, I started working for Marvel Animation. That was the studio, first big studio that I worked at. The first one technically was a very small one called Starburns on an HBO show, but you know, that's minor details. So I remember going to Starburns, the smaller studio, and reading books on protection magic. And this was about 2016. 2016 is when I sort of officially accepted the title of witch, where I no longer feared it. At this point, having so many ghost and spirit experiences in my life, kind of turned that down, tried to turn that off because it was really scary to me. But the title of witch and the idea of practicing witchcraft no longer scared me. I had gotten over that fear. And so I was actually going out and buying books and studying. And because I finally accepted the title of witch, I also started offering readings to people in person at work in exchange for lunch or coffee. So I would go into the studio and I would always bring my deck of cards with me. And some people would be like, "Hey, did you bring your deck today?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, did you want a reading?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'll trade you a Starbucks or I'll trade you a lunch at the commissary." And I'm like, "Cool, fantastic." Because a lot of these studios had a Starbucks on campus. I do not support Starbucks. Want to add that clarification. Um, this was many years ago. Uh, anyways, so in my mind, I wasn't a professional working witch. I wasn't a professional tarot reader. I was just reading for fun. I was giving people readings in exchange for things. And this trend sort of kept progressing, and I got really into things that I was into as a kid, such as tea leaf reading and palm reading and dream interpretation. These went from being in the background of my life to being front and center and fully steeped in my downtime. When I wasn't working at the studio, when I wasn't drawing, I was reading books, I was practicing, I was studying witchcraft and psychic practices. Heck, I didn't even get to mention this, but when I was in high school, after I got scared of the idea of witch, and like I said, I was going to thrift stores, I was buying books, I was really into psychic practices and dream work to the point that I would make my friends come spend, well, not make them. I mean, we were friends, whatever. They would come over, they would spend the night, and we would practice different psychic workings. For example, I distinctly remember doing energy sensing with my friends. I remember trying to read their aura. I remember literally putting my hand up to their hand and feeling their energy without ever touching. I remember seeing the colors around their hands when I was looking at their auras. I remember trying to brew a magical tea blend that would help us lucid dream. It did not work. That one was a little bit disappointing, but I really got into all of these different psychic practices. And it wasn't until, like I said, 2016 that I brought witchcraft in and I brought that back into my life, paired with everything else. So, like I said, I started offering this as readings on the side for people. And eventually, I got to a point in my studies where I had been taking classes with other professional readers where I decided I did want this to be something that I could make money on the side. So that way I could offer this not to just people that I'm seeing in person, but I could offer it to people online as well, to people I don't see in person. And so it ended up becoming my what I called side gig, my side hustle, right? It was something I was doing on the side for fun, but also to make money and also to grow and develop my practice, my business. And so that was just kind of something I did on the side. I mostly was focused on my work as a animation professional, but since about 2017, I want to say, maybe about actually, no, I started having experiences. I'm trying to get my dates right here. Since about 2015, 2016, I started having some body issues and I didn't understand what was going on, and neither did my doctors. I was sent to physical therapy. I was sent to GIs. I was sent to all different types of people telling me it was stress, it was anxiety, it was, um, at one point I was told I had arthritis in my neck, which later ended up not being true. All these different things. And nobody could really explain what was going on. And it wasn't until I was already a working professional in animation that in about 2018, I was sent to the emergency room. And I finally had a clue as to what was going on. And they had told me that I had a cyst rupture, an ovarian cyst rupture. And they told me it wasn't a big deal. And that it was like, ah, it's normal. Yeah, people with ovaries, it happens sometimes. Don't worry about it. It's just a bad period. If you're not watching the video, I'm making a very skeptical face right now. And so this kind of set me on a journey of like, well, what is really going on with me? And I did a bunch of research and I got another scan, yada, yada, yada. A plus B equals C. Here I am. 2019, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. And I was supposed to I was going to get surgery. I did. Words. I was scheduled to have surgery, but they scheduled the surgery uh for a couple of years later because they told me I really needed to focus on getting my nervous system cooled down and getting my body to a state where if I had the surgery, when I had the surgery, I would be able to heal a lot better instead of having all these stress hormones, all these different things happening, um, and trying to get my body physically, mentally, emotionally in alignment, essentially, is what I was prepping for. And so this required me to go to physical therapy. And after going to physical therapy for almost a year leading up to my surgery, my physical therapist told me, you really need to you really need to step away from animation, from being an artist, from drawing. Your body can't handle it. Because every time I would go into physical therapy a couple weeks later, I'd be completely inflamed again, back to square one. And my physical therapist for months was fighting this back and forth battle of we were doing so well. What happened? What did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. I've just been working. And she figured out, oh, it's the work. It's the sitting at the desk for 8 hours a day, hunched over, not even 8 hours a day, sometimes longer. And so she had me take a break for a little bit to see if I improved. And to no one's surprise, I improved because my body wasn't being strained. And so I was forced to leave my career right before my surgery, about 6 months before my surgery. I made the announcement in 2021, I'm leaving the animation industry. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea. I hadn't even considered that my side hustle as a witch could even be my full-time job. But I stepped away from the industry, and when I did, I lost a lot of people. I'm not just talking about followers, because I did have quite a bit of followers on Instagram and at the time Twitter and yada, 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 because people were interested in the projects that I was working on and the art that I was making, but they weren't interested in me. And I realized after I had announced that due to my disability, my invisible disability, I wouldn't be an artist anymore. I wouldn't be working professionally anymore. A lot of, yes, random followers did leave, but I lost a lot of people I thought I was friends with too. A lot of people stopped talking to me. A lot of people stopped interacting with me. People weren't checking in on me anymore to see how I was doing post-surgery, pre-surgery. And I realized that a lot of these people wanted an in, a leg up. But at the time, I had started my TikTok about a year or two before my surgery. And my TikTok I specifically made to just be about my fun paranormal experiences, my cats. If you didn't know, I have 3 cats. To be about the things that I enjoyed, sharing my experiences, sharing the things that I've learned as a witch. And people really resonated with that. They didn't care if I was somebody in the industry. They didn't care if I could get them a job. They enjoyed me for me and my weird witchy psychic ways. So, post-operation 2023, I made my business, my side business as a witch, my full-time job. And I changed the name because it used to be oh gosh, it used to be Eidolon's Kingdom, but nobody could spell that. And nobody knew what that was from. Everybody thought it was from Final Fantasy. No, it wasn't from Final Fantasy. It was from Edgar Allan Poe because I'm a goth nerd. I'm a booky goth nerd, okay? I'm not a, well, I was a bit of a game nerd too, but no, it wasn't from Final Fantasy. So I changed my name to be Fantasma Witch. And the reason why I changed my name was because one, I felt like my operation was a sort of phoenix moment for me, really, where I had burned up completely and I was being born anew. And so I felt like it was very fitting to also change the name of my business since it was going to be my full-time job. And I also wanted it to represent my heritage. And I wanted it to represent something personal and meaningful to me. So, Fantasma is Latin. The root word Latin means ghost, phantom, spirit. And in both Spanish and Italian, it means ghost. So it's the same word. And my cultural background, my heritage, I have on one side of my family immigrants from Mexico. My great grandparents came from Mexico. And on the other side, my great grandparents immigrated from Italy. And so the fact that I started this journey as a witch, as a psychic, because I was having ghostly experiences, and that my heritage is both Mexican Italian, Fantasma Witch just made sense to me. And I decided this is me now. This is me now. And so that's kind of how my business was born, how my name was chosen. As a matter of fact, once I got really serious studying witchcraft and studying curanderismo, I actually started to discover that my family did a lot of these practices on the down low, quietly. Um, the first sign of this was actually when I was in high school when my Italian nana passed away. We didn't call her nonna because we couldn't pronounce the nonna, so we called her Nana. When she had passed away, they had told us go through her house, pick out items that you like that will remind you of her as a keepsake. And some of the things that I got was an incense burner, a book on pendulum readings, a runes set, and a divination card deck based on runes. So I found out that she was into a lot of this stuff. Specifically, I believe it was because she got into it after her daughter passed away, my aunt, when I was very, 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 very young. Um, but I just never knew until she had passed. And when I want to say, when I was working in animation 2017, I was taking curanderismo classes, which is folk healing from Mexico. And I was taking these classes, and one of the classes was about egg limpias, huevos con limpias. And I was living with, I had lived with my abuelita, my grandma, when I was going to college. And so sometimes she would ask me like what I was up to, and I was trying to tell her that I was learning about our cultural folk traditions without scaring her because she's very religious. And so I was telling her, "Oh, I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but like there's like a cleansing that you can do with like different items." And she said, "Oh yeah, like with an egg, like a huevo. I don't like limpias." And I was like, "I'm sorry, abuelita, back up. How do you know about this?" Because yes, her mother was from Mexico, her father was from Mexico. She was raised in America, and because of the time period, they were not raised with a lot of cultural traditions. They were, but not so much because they really wanted their children to thrive and survive in America and have them blend into society. And so I didn't think my abuelita would know about limpias. I just didn't think, especially because she was also raised in a very, very Christian household. I just thought there's no way. And so when she said, "Oh yeah, like with an egg," I was like, Wait, what?" And she proceeded to tell me that her mother, my great grandmother, used to use eggs and different plants to cleanse and remedy the people of the neighborhood. I was absolutely shook because my abuelita was telling me that my great grandmother performed cleansing rituals for people in their hometown. They owned a botanica, and people in the town used to come to my great grandmother to get cleansings, to get limpias. So, this is why choosing the name that referenced both sides of my heritage, as well as my experiences with ghosts, really meant a lot to me and was really important to me. So, now, here we are today, and I am a professional psychic witch. My favorite thing to offer is pet communication, but I'm also a palm reader, tarot reader. I'm also a certified Reiki master. I do readings every Tuesday at a cafe in Burbank called Three Sisters Coffee and Tea. You can come in for a reading if you want. And I offer readings online. I also have been going to Magic Market. I started going to Magic Market as a reader when they first started going to the Victorian uh, houses called Heritage Square here in Los Angeles. And I've been participating in markets for about, my gosh, it's going to be 2 years as of this spring. And so now here I am doing a podcast. And I used to have a podcast when I worked in animation called A Jaunty Haunt. I would be very surprised if anybody here knew what that was. But that podcast was all about interviewing people from the animation industry and talking about their favorite spooky, funny, or scary uh, animation media, such as Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, or Casper, and or Hocus Pocus even. It didn't have to be animation. But having people talk about their favorite uh, movies and TV shows, and also talking about any paranormal, spooky experiences they had, and reading other people's spooky paranormal experiences who would write into the show. And I absolutely loved doing that podcast. And I've always wanted to get back into podcasting, but it took me a while to figure out what to do. So here we are. Here I am. And so, what I'd like to do, like I said, is I'd like to share my experiences with all of you, whether that's my paranormal experiences, my thoughts on different witchy topics, and have a conversation with all of you. So we can learn from each other. So you can find entertainment in my stories, hopefully. And I am going to use my artistic education and my experience to inform not only my readings and my teachings that I offer, because by the way, I have been teaching classes throughout the LA area as well, not just online. But I want to use all these experiences that I've told you about to share them with you, to educate, to raise people up. So, as a disabled trauma survivor, femme identifying, bisexual, Latina, I'm going to do my best to provide accessible witchcraft, accessible psychic workings for everyone as best as I can, all done ethically within the scope of my practice. And I hope that you will take this journey with me. So, if you would like to work with me, you can find me at phantasmawitch.com. If you would like to learn from me, I have classes on my website, but I also have a Patreon. That Patreon is free membership or paid. I'm going to be posting there every month uh, with different classes, workshops, behind the scenes, um, also Q&A, and Tarot Scopes Live is something that I'm doing every month at the end of the month. So usually the last week of the month, I will go live on YouTube, or if not YouTube, you can also find it at the same time live on my Patreon. They'll be streaming at the same time. Um, I'm not going to be as active on Instagram anymore, but you can find me on Instagram as of right now. You can also find me on TikTok, but again, I'm not going to be as active on there anymore. Um, like I mentioned earlier, you can find me on Blue Sky. That's more my random funny thoughts and takes as they come to me. So, thank you all again for joining me for this first episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or anything, oh my gosh, I don't know if that caught that, but that was huge thunder. As I'm wrapping up my first episode, I'm taking that as a good sign. I love it. Thank you for joining me. I so appreciate you all. And if you have questions for the podcast or topics you'd like to discuss, head over to my Patreon, let me know. And I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you.